Files released today that were formerly top secret show Tony Blair considered radical solutions to solve the issue of illegal migration when he was Prime Minister. A detention camp on the Isle of Mull and breaking international law were among measures on migration presented to the former Prime Minister. He even considered a nuclear option of removing migrants to safe havens in third-party countries such as Turkey, South Africa and Kenya. Given Blair is said to be close to Keir Starmer, pulling the strings, some would say, is Labour's opposition to the Rwanda plan just a tad hypocritical? Coming to you first on this one, Paul. It is hypocritical, surely. I mean,
it is.
They've done everything they can to stop the Rwanda plan and slated at every opportunity. They were doing it in 2022, 23, 24. Their idea.
Shows how much the axis has shifted on the left, that actually once upon a time, many people on the left, including Blair himself clearly, although he had a very liberal approach to immigration generally, understood that control of the labour supply and controlling immigration generally, having some control over it at least, was important because the labour supply is a market dynamic, which, like all market dynamics, needs to be regulated so as to allow government to plan around things like welfare and jobs and housing and so on. 20 years ago, as we can see from what's been revealed, that was not particularly a controversial position on the left. And in fact, if you go back to that time, it was the open borders position that was, if you like, more controversial and was more of a fringe position. You know, roll forward 20 years and that has turned full circle now. And actually, if from a position on the left, and I know this from personal experience, you argue in favour of control of the labour supply and strong borders and you oppose open borders, you are almost regarded as some sort of crank within the Labour movement or someone who's clearly a closet Tory or on the side of Nigel Farage or something like that.
Or even worse, a closet racist.
Well,
Let's
exactly.
Say that,
and
shall we?
that gets thrown at those of us on the left who argue for regulation of the labour supply all the time. So, but what it does show absolutely is that there were people in the Labour movement at the senior levels of government who understood that you cannot have a situation where then as now you have thousands of mainly young men, because it is mainly young men, turning up on our shores seeking asylum. Where they are genuine asylum seekers, of course they deserve to be treated as such, but many are economic refugees and we need to have an honest debate.
Have you seen the Ricky Gervais Armageddon clip went out on Netflix?
Yes.
Have you seen him getting taken to task on social media for making an observational comedy joke about mostly being young men on the boats, which is actually a fact, and he's being tasked as being a racist now. So, I mean...
But if you look at the actual official government data, over 80% of the people coming across on the small boats are mainly young men. The issue here is not only what we're living through, which is the radicalisation of the left, as Paul says, which is putting Labour increasingly at odds with where a lot of voters are on these issues. I say this on Twitter all the time, or X. Most people in Britain want the boats to stop. They want the borders to be strengthened and they want less immigration. What Tony Blair was discussing 20 years ago is what many European countries are discussing today, and what the National Crime Agency here in Britain has said is the only thing that would make a tangible difference to stopping the boats, which is a deterrent, a third country deterrent. Namely, if you come to Britain illegally, you will be sent to another country and you will have your claim processed in another country. Now, what's interesting is Rishi Sunak is pursuing that through the Rwanda vote, crunch vote in the new year. Now look at the Labour Party today. They're now saying they're not only going to repeal that Rwanda plan, but they're going to repeal the illegal migration bill, which Rishi Sunak brought in. And so under a likely Labour government at the next election, we're not only going to see legal migration increase, because Labour, to be frank, are pretty comfortable with legal migration, but their plan is on illegal migration is clearly not going to work. They're saying they're going to smash the gangs. But anybody who's actually worked on that issue knows that's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one gang, there's another gang. So this is what worries me about where we're heading in 2024. Voters out there, your viewers, are saying, stop the boats. This isn't that difficult. Change international laws. Bring in new legislation. Have a third country deterrent. And we're heading into a Labour government where I suspect we'll see the number of small boats increase even more.
And yeah, obviously there is a human rights issue here. I mean, the one thing everybody wants, whether you're on the left or the right or somewhere in between, is we want to stop people suffering at the hands of criminal smuggling gangs. That's what we want to do. No one, and this is a depressing thing about this story that's come out today, nobody in the last 20 years has got even close to touching that, to solving that problem.
And the problem is, Dawn, it's made the whole issue of immigration toxic in our politics and in our society again. We kind of moved on, I've said this many times, from the days of, the National Front being on the march in the 1970s and, standing people in elections and so on and marching through areas where there are larger numbers of ethnic minorities. And then we got to a position throughout the kind of 80s and 90s where people generally felt that the situation was under control, the immigration was being managed properly, it was being regulated properly, numbers weren't terribly excessive. And then you really began to see the impact of EU free movement, and then with EU enlargement in 2004 with the Eastern European countries, that suddenly had rocket boosters put underneath it. And the thing just became completely badly managed and poorly regulated. And that's the sad thing, that it's not that people in this country have suddenly become, in my view, anti-immigration. It's not that they were ever anti-immigration. In my view, most people have always...
Racist.
Well,
another way of saying it, that's what people say.
In my view, most people have always been pro-immigration. They simply want the numbers to be managed properly. They want the numbers to be modest. And if that were the case, and if we had, decent integration policies, which we've been absolutely rubbish at, let's be honest about that, it wouldn't be the running story in our politics that it's become, and that's the real tragedy, I think.
Just pick you up on one thing. Maybe we disagree on this. I don't actually think integration policies are enough. I think what many people in this country want to see is just a lower overall level of migration. When Tony Blair came into office in 1997, net migration was 50,000. Net migration today is just short of 700,000. I mean, it's a completely different era. How can you integrate communities when you are exposing a country to that level of constant churn and change? And also, I would add, the migration that we are now witnessing through the small boats and also through legal migration is not like the migration of the last 20 years. It's not mainly coming from within Europe, within the European Union. Much of the migration today is coming from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, outside of the European Union. It's not only more likely to be a net fiscal cost to Britain's economy, but it's also culturally much more distinctive from migration that we've had in the past. So the integration issue, I think many people out there are saying, what's happening to my community, what's happening to my country? The quick answer to that is, if you want to get a more integrated country, you have to run sustainable levels of migration. We have to bring net migration down, in my view, to around 100,000 a year so we can fully absorb the migration of the last 20 years while also changing our relationship with international laws so we can actually clamp down on illegal migration and the gangs that are pushing that into our country.
I accept it is a numbers game. Because I think what incentive, and this is the question, what incentive is there on newcomers to integrate if the numbers are so large that actually, they think, well, there's loads of people coming with me and we're living in our own kind of communities, almost like ghettos within main cities.
But you can't even say that now, can you? Every time you have that conversation, it's like, people are integrating. It's like, no, if you live in certain parts, I live in East London. No, they're not.
I think we have to. Lots of people say we're a multicultural country. Actually, we don't have what you might term, in my view, genuine multiculturalism in this country. What we have are pockets of monocultures within individual towns and cities. And within those pockets of monoculture, in these places, people are living completely parallel lives.
Now, why is that? It's because the policy of multiculturalism prioritises minority group identities, cultures and traditions, and urges them to remain distinct from the wider community. This is where so many London commentators and columnists get it wrong. They think multiculturalism, well, if you critique multiculturalism, you're critiquing the wonder of diversity. Actually, people like me who say we have a problem with multiculturalism, what we're saying is the ism bit, the policy bit. We have a policy that basically prioritises minority groups over the majority and tells the majority that they can celebrate any identity except their own.
I think, unfortunately, gentlemen, we're running out of time. We could talk about this all night.